Hey everyone, welcome back to Boo Boo Update. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button for all the latest updates on Mama June family. Today, we've got something exciting to talk about, Honey Boo Boo family. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. So grab a seat, and let's dive right in. Just 3 days after their wedding, Pumpkin is devastated as Darrin Kitchens has been taken into police custody. Shocking revelations have surfaced. It turns out Darrin was secretly married 5 years ago, and from that previous marriage, he has 2 children. One is 4 years old and the other is 2. What's the real story? Stay tuned and watch the full video patiently, because in today's video, I am Erwin will be revealing the complete truth behind it all. A wedding day. For most, it is the culmination of a love story. A public declaration of a private bond. It's the first page of a new chapter, filled with promises of forever, of shared dreams, of a future built together. For Lauren Pumpkin Shannon, this day, her wedding to Darrin Kitchens, was precisely that. It was the fairy tale she had always dreamed of, unfolding in real time under the warm autumn sun. Every detail was perfect. Every smile seemed genuine. Every vow spoken appeared to be etched in stone. For 72 precious hours, Pumpkin was Mrs. Darrin Kitchens. She was a wife, living in the blissful bubble of newlywed life. 3 days. That's all it took for the fairy tale to shatter. 3 days for the dream to curdle into an unimaginable nightmare. 3 days for Pumpkin to learn that the man she had just promised her life to was a ghost. A phantom living a double life so monstrous, so deceptive, it would captivate and horrify a nation. Because Darrin Kitchens wasn't just a husband to Pumpkin. He was already a husband to someone else. And he was a father. Twice. This is the story of a love built on a foundation of lies. It's a story of betrayal, of a family torn apart before it even began, and of the shocking revelations that prove you can never truly know the person sleeping next to you. This is the story of Pumpkin and the secret life of Darrin Kitchens. Part 1. The Perfect Couple. Narrator. Harmony Creek, Georgia. It's the kind of town that seems pulled from a postcard. Life moves a little slower here. Roots run deep, and community is the bedrock of daily life. It was here that Lauren Shannon, known affectionately to everyone as Pumpkin, had built her life. Narrator. Known to many through her family's public profile, Pumpkin had carved out her own identity in Harmony Creek. She was seen as the grounded one, a loving mother dedicated to her own children, a woman who, despite a life in the spotlight, craved normalcy and genuine connection. Jessica Myers. Pumpkin, she's all heart. That's the best way to describe her. She loves fiercely. Her kids are her entire world, and all she's ever really wanted was that simple, happy family life. A good man who would love her and be a great stepdad. She wasn't asking for the moon, you know? Just a real partner. Someone to build with. Then, Darrin Kitchens entered the picture. He arrived in Harmony Creek not with a bang, but with a quiet confidence that was instantly magnetic. He was handsome, well-spoken, and seemed to possess an old-fashioned charm that was hard to resist. He told people he was a contractor, a man who worked with his hands, looking for a fresh start away from the hustle of a bigger city. Jessica Myers. He swept her off her feet. I mean, he swept all of us off our feet. He remembered little things, you know? He'd bring her coffee just the way she liked it without asking. He was incredible with her kids. He'd get down on the floor and play with them for hours. He looked at Pumpkin like she was the only woman in the world. We all thought, finally. She found him. She found her guy. He was perfect. Almost too perfect in hindsight. Their courtship was a whirlwind. To onlookers and friends, it was a romance for the ages. Darrin was attentive, supportive, and seamlessly integrated himself into Pumpkin's life and her family. He spoke of his own past in vague but poignant terms. He'd mention a difficult upbringing, a past that made him cherish the stability and love he'd found with Pumpkin even more. It was a narrative that garnered sympathy and made him seem all the more devoted. On social media, Pumpkin documented their love story. Each post was a testament to her growing happiness. The likes and supportive comments poured in. Her followers were thrilled to see her so content. Dr. Marcus Thorne. In cases of profound deception, the perpetrator often engages in a behavior we call love bombing. It's an intense, overwhelming display of affection and attention right at the beginning of a relationship. The goal is to make the target feel completely adored, to accelerate intimacy and dependency. The deceiver creates a custom-made fantasy for their victim. They learn what the person wants most, in this case, a devoted partner and father figure, and then they become a perfect actor playing that role. This makes the victim less likely to question inconsistencies or red flags later on, and Darrin played his part to perfection. Less than a year into their relationship, he proposed. The engagement was celebrated by family and friends. The wedding planning began immediately. No one, it seemed, had any reason to doubt him. He was Darrin Kitchens, the charming contractor who was about to marry his soulmate. But a soul can't be shared when it's already been promised to someone else. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with excitement. Darrin was involved in every step, a fact that friends pointed to as proof of his commitment. He helped choose the venue, had opinions on the flowers, and even wrote his own vows, promising to show Pumpkin a draft before the big day, but always saving the final version as a surprise. Jessica Myers. He'd say things like, "I've waited my whole life for a woman like you, Pumpkin. I want our wedding day to be as perfect as you are." It sounds so sick now, but at the time, we were all just melting. We thought he was the most romantic man alive. There was this one time, maybe a month before the wedding, I asked him about his family. Just making conversation, you know? "Will any of your family be able to make it?" I asked. Jessica Myers. He got this sad look on his face. He said his parents had passed away years ago, and he had a sister he wasn't close with who lived out of state. He said, "Pumpkin's family is my family now. You guys are all I need." He was so convincing. We just felt sorry for him. We had no idea he was erasing a whole other family with his words. His backstory was a carefully constructed tragedy, designed to isolate him from his past and embed him more deeply into Pumpkin's present. It was a firewall, preventing any prying questions that might lead back to the life he was so desperately trying to conceal. And so the day arrived. October 5th, 2024. The weather was perfect. The guests were seated, and Darrin Kitchens stood at the altar, waiting for his bride. He looked calm, happy, and deeply in love. He was the image of a man about to pledge his life to one woman, and one woman only. The ceremony was emotional. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Pumpkin's words were full of hope and gratitude. "Pumpkin, Darrin, from the moment you came into my life, you brought a sense of peace I didn't know I was missing. You love me, and you love my children as your own. Today, in front of everyone we love, I promise to be your partner, your best friend, and your wife for all the days of my life." Then it was Darrin's turn. With a steady voice, he looked his bride in the eyes and delivered a promise that, in retrospect, is chilling in its hypocrisy. "Darrin, Pumpkin, my love, everything in my past was just a path that led me to you. You are my home. You are my future. I vow today to be honest, to be faithful, and to protect our family with every fiber of my being. My life began when I met you, and I pledge my whole self to you, and only you forever." My life began when I met you. A convenient turn of phrase for a man trying to erase the 5 years of life he'd already lived with another woman. To be honest, to be faithful. Words that would soon become the very evidence of his staggering betrayal. They were pronounced husband and wife. Legally, in the eyes of the state and all those present, their union was sealed. But in a different town, just a few hours' drive away, another woman held a marriage certificate with Darrin Kitchens' name on it. And in that home, 2 small children called him Daddy. The clock was ticking on Darrin's perfect illusion. Part 2 of The Shattering. The first 72 hours of marriage are often a blur of blissful exhaustion. A quiet pocket of time where the rest of the world fades away. For Pumpkin and Darrin, These first few days were no different. They were spent in their Harmony Creek home, unboxing wedding gifts, laughing about moments from the reception, and making plans for a honeymoon they intended to take in a few weeks. It was a domestic scene of perfect, newfound marital peace. Jessica Myers. She called me the morning it happened. Just a couple of hours before, actually. She was so happy. Giddy. She was saying, "Jess, I'm a wife. It feels so weird and so right at the same time." She told me Darrin was making them pancakes, that he was the best husband ever. It was a completely normal, happy conversation. I hung up the phone smiling for her. And then the world fell apart. Narrator. It was just after 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. A day like any other. Pumpkin was in the kitchen, Darrin was in the living room. The sound that broke the morning silence wasn't a gunshot or a scream. It was a firm, official knock on the front door. Narrator. Through the peephole, Darrin would have seen them. 2 uniformed officers from the county sheriff's department. Not the kind of visitors you expect on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after your wedding. Narrator. Pumpkin, hearing the serious tone, came to the door. She saw the police, saw the warrant in Darrin's hand, and her mind likely raced through 1,000 innocent possibilities. A traffic ticket? A mistake? Some kind of misunderstanding? The truth was far beyond her comprehension. My sources in the sheriff's department said the initial approach was quiet. They weren't coming in with a SWAT team. The warrant was for Darrin Kitchen's arrest on a charge of bigamy, with potential for further charges of fraud pending investigation. The complaint hadn't come from Harmony Creek. It was filed 150 miles away, in a different jurisdiction, by a woman named Sarah Kitchens, his wife. Narrator. Back at the house, the scene was one of surreal and escalating confusion. Jessica Myers. Pumpkin told me later that Darrin just went white. He started saying, "There must be a mistake. This is a misunderstanding." But there was no fight in him. The officers were calm. They said, "Mr. Kitchens, we have a warrant for your arrest. You need to come with us." Pumpkin started panicking. She's asking, "Arrest for what? What is happening?" She was looking at Darrin to explain it, to fix it. But he wouldn't look at her. He couldn't even look her in the eye. That was the moment she knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. As they led her husband of 3 days to the squad car, the world began to spin. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, their quiet street suddenly the scene of a drama they didn't understand. For Pumpkin, this wasn't just an arrest. It was the public demolition of her life. She was left standing on her porch, the smell of pancakes still in the air, watching the man she loved be driven away in the back of a police car. The silence he left behind was deafening. The hours that followed were a torturous limbo. Pumpkin, accompanied by her mother and a frantic Jessica, rushed to the county jail, desperate for answers. But information was scarce. They were met with bureaucratic walls and the cold, hard language of the law. Ben Carter. In a situation like this, the initial hours are chaos for the family left behind. They're in shock, and the system isn't designed for emotional support. It's designed for processing. Darrin would have been booked, fingerprinted, and placed in a holding cell. Pumpkin, on the outside, was left to grapple with a single, horrifying word that someone at the station had finally uttered to her: bigamy. Bigamy. The act of marrying someone while still being legally married to another. It was a word that felt ancient, something out of a historical novel, not something that happened in Harmony Creek to her. Her mind reeled. How could this be possible? It had to be a mistake. A prank. A case of mistaken identity. She kept saying it over and over. There's another Darrin Kitchens. They have the wrong guy. She was trying to build a logical explanation because the alternative was too insane to accept. We were all trying to help her. We were looking up public records, trying to find anything that would make it make sense. We found their marriage license clear as day, filed just a few days prior. And then my phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a local TV station in a town I'd never heard of. The story had broken. Leaked from the jurisdiction where the complaint was filed. And this news report contained the detail that would detonate the final vestiges of Pumpkin's hope. The detail that made the betrayal absolute. The initial report was sparse on details, but it had the core facts. Darrin Kitchens, resident of Harmony Creek, had been arrested. The complaint was filed by his wife, Sarah Kitchens, to whom he had been married since 2019. And then came the line that changed everything. The couple, according to the complaint, have 2 children together. 2 children. I read it out loud before I could stop myself. From that previous marriage, he has 2 children. One is 4 years old and the other is 2. I looked over at Pumpkin. The color just drained from her face. It was like watching someone's soul leave their body. The denial just evaporated and was replaced by this look of, I can't even describe it. Utter devastation. Narrator. The numbers were cruel, irrefutable daggers. A marriage 5 years ago. A 4-year-old child. A 2-year-old child. This wasn't a youthful mistake or a long-forgotten divorce that wasn't finalized. This was a parallel life. Dr. Evelyn Reed. The timeline is what makes this case so legally and emotionally egregious. A 5-year marriage means he was married for years before he even met Pumpkin. The existence of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old means he was actively having children with his first wife during the exact period he was courting his second. He wasn't just hiding a past. He was actively living a double life in the present. This elevates the crime from a simple administrative error to a calculated, malicious act of deception. The legal charges would reflect that. Bigamy is the baseline. But you're also looking at potential charges for fraud, specifically marriage fraud, and depending on shared finances, things could get even more complex. For Pumpkin, the legal definitions didn't matter. What mattered was the breathtaking scale of the lie. Every "I love you," every shared dream, every promise was now tainted. His vow to be honest and faithful. A lie. His claim that his life began when he met her. A lie. His tragic story of having no family. A monstrous, calculated lie designed to conceal the wife and 2 babies he went home to when he wasn't with her. Jessica Myers. The biggest question became, how? How did he do it? His job as a contractor, it was the perfect cover. He could be gone for days at a time, claiming he was on a job site out of town. We now realize he was just going home. He was going back to his real family. He was living 2 separate lives in 2 separate towns. He had 2 sets of clothes, 2 toothbrushes, 2 wives, 2 families who had no idea the other existed. Narrator. In a matter of hours, Pumpkin went from a blushing bride to the victim of a crime so personal and so bizarre it was now national news. Her private heartbreak was about to become a public spectacle. The man she had married was not just a liar. He was a master architect of deceit. And as he sat in a jail cell, the 2 worlds he had built were colliding with catastrophic force, leaving Pumpkin buried in the rubble. Part 3. The Anatomy of a Lie. 150 miles. That was the distance between Darrin Kitchens' 2 lives. Far enough for anonymity, close enough for a commute he could disguise as a work trip. On one end of the line was Harmony Creek, his new life, his new love, the fantasy he was building with Pumpkin. On the other end was Oak Haven, his old life, his first wife, and the reality of his 2 young children. To understand the depth of his deception, you have to understand the life he was hiding. Ben Carter. Once the story broke, every journalist in the state was trying to find Sarah Kitchens, the first wife. She, quite understandably, went into hiding immediately, communicating only through a lawyer. But we were able to piece together a picture of her life through public records and by speaking to neighbors in Oak Haven. Sarah Kitchens, according to public records, was 29 years old. She worked as a part-time nurse's aide at a local clinic. She and Darrin had purchased their small 3-bedroom home in Oak Haven in 2020, a year after they were married. To their neighbors, they were a normal, quiet family. Anonymous neighbor. He seemed like a good dad. I'd see him out in the yard throwing a ball with his little boy. He and Sarah hosted a 4th of July barbecue last year. He was always friendly, waved when he drove by. He told everyone he was a long-haul trucker, which is why he was gone so much. Said he had routes that kept him on the road for a week, sometimes 2 at a time. No one thought twice about it. We just felt for Sarah, raising 2 little ones mostly by herself. Narrator. A long-haul trucker. In Harmony Creek, he was a contractor who took on out-of-town jobs. In Oak Haven, he was a trucker who was on the road. 2 different professions, one singular purpose: to create a plausible excuse for prolonged absences. It was the central pillar supporting his entire web of lies. Dr. Marcus Thorne. This is a hallmark of a sophisticated pathological liar, often with narcissistic or antisocial personality traits. This isn't just telling small lies to get out of trouble. This is the creation of a complete, alternative reality. It requires immense cognitive energy to maintain. He has to keep his stories straight, manage 2 sets of social circles, 2 financial lives, 2 emotional landscapes. The compartmentalization required is extreme. He essentially has to be 2 different people. The Darrin in Oak Haven is likely very different from the Darrin in Harmony Creek. Each one is a performance tailored to that specific audience. The question on everyone's mind was, how did Sarah, wife number 1, find out? The answer, according to Ben Carter's reporting, was as mundane and modern as the crime itself: social media. Ben Carter, a distant cousin of Sarah's, happens to be a fan of Pumpkin's family and follows her on Instagram. A few days after the wedding, Pumpkin posted a flurry of professional wedding photos. The cousin saw a picture of the happy couple, recognized Darrin immediately, and sent the post to Sarah, probably with a confused message like, "Isn't this your husband?" Imagine that moment. Sarah Kitchens, a tired mother of 2, believing her husband is hundreds of miles away on a trucking route, suddenly sees his face on her phone. He's in a tuxedo, kissing another woman under a shower of confetti with the caption, "Mr. and Mrs. Kitchens, October 5, 2024". In that instant, her entire world would have collapsed. The man she loved, the father of her children, was not on the road for work. He was starting a new life with a new wife. Statement on behalf of Sarah Kitchens. A day after the arrest, Sarah's lawyer released a statement. It read, in part, "Our client, Sarah Kitchens, is devastated by the discovery of her husband's deceitful and criminal actions. Her primary focus at this incredibly difficult time is the well-being and privacy of her 2 young children. She was entirely unaware of Mr. Kitchens' other life. She believed him to be a loving husband and father. The betrayal is profound. We ask that the media respect her family's privacy as they begin to navigate the legal process and heal from this trauma." Dr. Evelyn Reed. That statement is legally very smart. It establishes her as a victim, which is crucial for the prosecution's bigamy case and for her own eventual divorce and fraud claims. By stating she was entirely unaware, it preempts any defense Darrin might try to mount that this was some sort of open or polyamorous arrangement. She is drawing a clear line in the sand. She was a victim of a crime. With the truth revealed, people in Pumpkin's life began to look back, searching for the red flags they had all missed. And under the harsh light of this new reality, innocuous moments suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. The red flags are so obvious now. It's like they're giant, waving banners. His phone, for instance. It was always on silent, always face down on the table. He said he didn't like to be disturbed when he was with Pumpkin. We thought it was romantic, a sign he was present. Now we know it was to hide the calls and texts from his other wife. And his finances. He was always cagey about money. He used cash for almost everything. He had a separate bank account he claimed was for his business. He never wanted to join his finances with Pumpkin's, saying they should wait until after the wedding to simplify things. It wasn't about simplicity. It was about preventing a paper trail that would lead back to Oak Haven. Ben Carter. Our investigation found he was essentially siphoning money from both lives. He would tell Sarah he had a bad week on the road to explain a lack of funds, while simultaneously telling Pumpkin a contracting job had a delayed payment. He was playing a shell game with his finances, his time, and with people's hearts. Dr. Marcus Thorne. This speaks to the core motivation in many of these cases. It's not always about love. It's about control and ego. For a narcissist, having two families, two women who adore him, is the ultimate validation. He gets to be the center of two separate universes. He controls all the information. He holds all the power. The deception itself is part of the thrill. It reinforces his sense of superiority, that he's smart enough to pull it off. The devastating emotional collateral damage to the wives and children is often not even a primary consideration for him. They are props in the play that he is directing. And the most devastating prop in Darrin's play was the wedding itself. An event that requires public records, witnesses, and a legal declaration. It seems like an impossibly brazen act for a man with so much to hide. Dr. Evelyn Reed. Committing bigamy so openly is both incredibly arrogant and incredibly foolish. In the digital age with social media, it's not a question of if you'll be caught, but when. To have a public wedding, knowing those photos will be online, is a sign of a person who either has a stunning lack of foresight or, more likely, a personality that makes them feel they are invincible, that the rules don't apply to them. He likely believed he could control the flow of information forever. As these details emerged, a portrait of Darrin Kitchens began to form. Not as the charming contractor or the loving trucker, but as a predator. A man who preyed on the desire for love and stability. He didn't just lie. He weaponized the hopes and dreams of two different women, building his own selfish kingdom on their emotional foundations. He wasn't just a bigamist. He was a thief who stole years of life, trust, and security from two families. And for Pumpkin, the theft was acute. He hadn't just stolen her future. He had poisoned her past, forcing her to question every memory, every smile, every single moment of the love she thought was real. Part 4. The Fallout and the Frenzy. The story of Pumpkin and Darrin Kitchens was no longer a local crime report. It was a media firestorm. The bizarre and shocking details were tailor-made for the 24-hour news cycle and the voracious appetite of social media. Within days, satellite news vans were parked on the once quiet streets of Harmony Creek. Reporters camped outside Pumpkin's home, shouting questions whenever the front door opened. Ben Carter. It's a perfect storm of a story. You have a public figure, a relatable betrayal, and a villain who seems almost cartoonishly evil in his deception. It ticks all the boxes. For the media, it's a goldmine. For the person at the center of it, like Pumpkin, it's a second wave of trauma. Her most private pain is now public entertainment. Pumpkin became a prisoner in her own home, the same home where she had been a happy bride just days before. The wedding gifts sat in piles, their cheerful wrapping paper a cruel joke. Every object was a reminder of the lie. The wedding photos on the wall were now evidence of a crime. The new monogram towels, P&D, were a testament to a union that never truly existed. Jessica Myers. It was a siege. We had to put up sheets over the windows. She couldn't even take out the trash without someone snapping her picture. And the online comments. My God. People are horrible. Of course, you had thousands who were supportive. But then you had the trolls. People saying, how could she not know? Or, she must have been desperate. They were victim-blaming her for being deceived by a professional con artist. It was disgusting. She was in the middle of the worst moment of her life, and she had to deal with the judgment of strangers on top of it all. The question, how could she not know, is a common one in cases of extreme betrayal. But experts say it stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of the psychology of deception. Dr. Marcus Thorne. We have a natural bias to believe the people we love. Trust is the default setting in an intimate relationship. To be constantly suspicious, to fact-check your partner's every statement, is not a healthy way to live. Deceivers like Darrin exploit this. They prey on trust. They don't just tell one lie. They build an entire scaffolding of believable lies. His stories about his job, his tragic family past, They were all designed to preemptively answer questions and build a wall against scrutiny. Blaming the victim is a defense mechanism for the public. It allows them to believe this could never happen to me because I'm smarter. The reality is, anyone who wants to be loved and trusted is vulnerable to this kind of masterful manipulation. While Pumpkin dealt with the emotional and public fallout, a legal storm was brewing for Darrin Kitchens. He was formally charged with bigamy, a felony in the state of Georgia. But that was just the beginning. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the legal analyst, is back. She stands in front of a whiteboard with legal terms like bigamy, marriage fraud, theft by deception. Dr. Evelyn Reed. So, the bigamy charge is straightforward. He knowingly entered into a marriage contract while already in a valid, existing one. The prosecution has the marriage certificate from 2019 and the one from 2024. It's an open and shut case. But the bigger legal battle is in the associated charges. Marriage fraud is key. Pumpkin's legal team will argue she was fraudulently induced into this marriage. This isn't just about annulling the marriage. It's about seeking damages for the emotional and financial cost of this deception. The legal process meant that Pumpkin had to do the unthinkable, legally annul her marriage just days after it began. It was a painful, bureaucratic process that forced her to declare her own wedding a fraud. Dr. Evelyn Reed. An annulment, legally, declares that the marriage was never valid from its inception. Unlike divorce, which ends a valid marriage, an annulment erases it. In this case, the grounds are clearly fraud and bigamy. She would also have to disentangle any shared assets, which, thankfully, seems minimal given Darrin's cash-based, secretive finances. But think of the emotional toll, having to legally repudiate what you believed was the happiest day of your life. Meanwhile, Darrin's legal troubles were mounting. As prosecutors in 2 different counties began to coordinate, a darker financial picture emerged. Ben Carter. He had credit cards opened under false pretenses. He had taken out small personal loans using addresses from both towns. Investigators started looking into his contracting business and found it barely existed. He had a business license, but very little legitimate income. The theory is that he was essentially living off a combination of Sarah's income as a nurse's aide, small loans, and whatever money he could get from Pumpkin or her family under the guise of business expenses. He was a financial parasite attached to 2 hosts. And at the heart of this entire tragedy were the children. 3 children in total. Pumpkin's children, who had come to love Darrin as a father figure, were now left confused and hurt, their sense of stability shattered. And Darrin's own 2 biological children in Oak Haven, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, were now at the center of a criminal investigation, their father a public disgrace, their mother left to pick up the pieces. Jessica Myers. That's the part that just destroys Pumpkin. She's a mom, first and foremost. She kept saying, "Those poor babies. They have no idea." And her own kids, trying to explain to them that the man who was just at your wedding, who you were told was your new stepdad, is gone and he's not coming back. How do you even begin to have that conversation? He didn't just betray 2 women. He betrayed 3 children. That's the part that's unforgivable. Dr. Marcus Thorne. The ripple effect on the children is the most tragic part of these stories. For Pumpkin's children, there's a breach of trust and attachment. For Darrin's biological children, the consequences are lifelong. They will grow up with the stigma of their father's actions. Their sense of identity and family history is corrupted from the start. The damage he has inflicted extends for a generation. It's a profound legacy of harm. As the weeks turned into a month, the media frenzy slowly died down, but the reality for the 2 families only grew harsher. Darrin Kitchens, unable to make bail, remained in custody. His 2 worlds, once so carefully separated, had now become 2 sets of victims, forever linked by the actions of one man. For Pumpkin, the path forward was murky. The question was no longer, how could this happen? But, how do I survive this? Her fairy tale was over. Her marriage was a crime scene. And she was left to navigate the wreckage, piece by painful piece. Part 5. The the long road to reckoning. Time does not heal all wounds. Sometimes, it simply provides the distance needed to survey the full extent of the damage. For Pumpkin Shannon, the months after Darrin's arrest were a slow, arduous process of rebuilding in the scorched earth of her life. The first step was erasing him. The annulment was granted quickly. Legally, her marriage to Darrin Kitchens was voided, as if it never happened. But memories cannot be annulled. The emotional and psychological knots he had tied were far more difficult to undo. Jessica Myers. She started going to therapy. It was the best thing she could have done. She had to process the fact that the relationship wasn't real. Not in the way she thought. She was grieving a man who never actually existed. The Darrin she loved was a character, a role he was playing for her. Coming to terms with that is a mind-bending kind of grief. Dr. Marcus Thorne. It is a very specific type of psychological trauma known as identity abuse. The perpetrator fundamentally destabilizes the victim's sense of reality. They begin to distrust their own judgment, their own intuition. The path to healing involves rebuilding that core sense of self-trust. It requires the victim to understand that their ability to love and trust is a strength, not a weakness, and that it was exploited by someone with a profound personality disorder. They were not foolish. They were victimized. Part of that healing process for Pumpkin involved a difficult decision. Sources close to the family say she wrote Darrin a letter in jail. Not a letter of anger or hate, but a letter of questions. She needed to understand, if only for her own peace of mind, what could possibly motivate a person to inflict such pain. Ben Carter. We don't know the exact contents of that letter, but we do know through his lawyer that Darrin Kitchens wrote back. His response, from what I've been told, was not the apology or explanation Pumpkin might have been hoping for. Darrin's reply was reportedly filled with self-pity and blame. He claimed he had been under immense pressure. He wrote that he loved both women and didn't know how to get out of the situation he had created. He presented himself not as the architect of the lie, but as another of its victims. Dr. Marcus Thorne. This is, again, classic narcissistic behavior. A failure to take genuine responsibility. In his mind, he is the victim. The pressure of maintaining the lies was difficult for him. The consequences of being caught are unfair to him. There is a profound lack of empathy, an inability to truly comprehend the devastation he has caused to others. His apology, if any, is likely strategic, aimed at mitigating his circumstances rather than expressing true remorse. For Pumpkin, that letter, with its lack of accountability, was a painful but necessary closure. It was the final confirmation that the man she thought she knew was a phantom. It allowed her to stop searching for answers from him and start building them for herself. She began to focus on what was real: her children, her family, and her own resilience. Meanwhile, the legal system ground on. Darrin Kitchens, facing overwhelming evidence, opted to take a plea deal rather than face a jury. Dr. Evelyn Reed. A plea deal was his only real option. A trial would have been a media circus, and the testimony from both Pumpkin and Sarah would have been devastating. He pleaded guilty to one felony count of bigamy and one count of financial fraud. The other charges were dropped as part of the deal. The prosecution likely agreed to this to spare the victims the trauma of a public trial. At his sentencing, both Pumpkin and Sarah Kitchens submitted victim impact statements, which were read aloud by the prosecutor. Pumpkin's statement spoke of the violation of trust and the public humiliation. Sarah spoke of the years of lies and the profound impact on their two small children, who would now grow up with an incarcerated father. He didn't just break the law. He broke people. He broke families. He turned moments of joy into evidence of a crime. We are his victims, but we will also be his survivors. Darrin Kitchens was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. He was ordered to pay restitution to both women, and a permanent restraining order was put in place, preventing him from ever contacting Pumpkin or her children again. For the law, it was justice. For the families, it was simply the end of one painful chapter and the beginning of a lifetime of recovery. Today, Life in Harmony Creek has returned to a semblance of normal. Pumpkin Shannon continues to focus on her children and her own well-being, away from the glare of the media spotlight. She has, through her family, expressed gratitude for the public support, but has chosen to heal in private. Jessica Myers. She's strong. Stronger than anyone I know. She's not letting this define her. She says she's not Darrin Kitchen's second wife or his victim. She's Pumpkin. She's a mother. She's a survivor. She'll have scars, of course. But she's not broken. He didn't break her. In Oak Haven, Sarah Kitchens has filed for divorce and is quietly raising her 2 children, supported by her family and her community. She too is a survivor, a woman who unknowingly shared her husband with a whole other world, and is now tasked with explaining that world to her children when they are old enough to ask. The story of Darrin Kitchens is a terrifying cautionary tale about the darkness that can hide behind a charming smile. It's a story about the devastating power of lies and the profound resilience of the human heart. It forces us to ask a difficult question: how well can we ever really know another person? Perhaps the biggest lie Darrin Kitchens ever told was not that he was unmarried, or that he had no other children. Perhaps the biggest lie was the illusion that he was capable of love at all. For Pumpkin and for Sarah, the truth came at an unbearable cost. But in finding that truth, they were finally set free from the man who was never truly theirs to begin with. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Boo Boo Update. Thank you for watching.